Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Happy New Year! Now for the bad news. That was a short-lived reprieve from SHDF, wasn't it? Okay, it appears as though there is a very large body of evidence to support the speculation that the Chinese may do a military-style embargo on Taiwan between 30 to 45 days from now. Okay, there's a large amount of evidence to suggest this. We're going to be breaking down Max Morton's in-depth analyses of the situation over at Forward Observer YouTube channel, and I'm going to provide my meta-analysis to things as I usually do. Typically, this channel and Forward Observer, we come to the same conclusions. I do the math in my head. They're military analysts, open source intelligence experts, so they're able to give you the long division form and go over all the individual data points, which is absolutely essential. You shouldn't just take premonitions from a raging preparedness madman like myself. You should, command that we provide you with all of the evidence. But nonetheless, our track record for predictions is fairly accurate. Anyways, enough of all that. Let's talk about why I have this graph of the NASDAQ here, okay? I think this may have something to do with it. If you look at the NASDAQ over the last couple of years, it was hyperinflated after the bubble of 2020, okay? So you can see here, 2020, it goes up, everybody's riding high, everybody's pumping all their stimulus checks into the stock market, and around here, this, I actually, happened sometime around here. This is when Wall Street bets happened, okay? And then that's where things got a little shaky, but it kept on advancing. And then sometime late November 2021, the whole thing just crashed. And now it's just been on a downward trend. Now, a lot of people have attributed this downward trend to the fact that this had to fall because it was hyperinflated due to all of the quantitative easing that was occurring. Another explanation, however, for this crash might be that in order for big tech to function, because the NASDAQ is all FANG stocks, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, etc., etc. So in order for them to function, they need two things. Two critical components for the NASDAQ are energy and chips. If you don't have energy and you don't have chips, guess what? This is going to crash hard. Everybody expected that there would be no energy shortage because remember, early pandemic, energy was really cheap. You couldn't sell oil. Because of the shutdowns and everybody was, working remotely and all this stuff. So there were high hopes that the metaverse was going to take off and everybody was just going to be in their incubators in their homes while getting things delivered from Skip the Dishes every day. Unfortunately, that didn't materialize like they thought and things started to crash. And you also had the Russia war, which increased the global price of energy, and it made energy scarcity a reality that big tech had to confront. In addition to this, now we are going to likely have chip shortages because TSMC likely is going to burn the boats and the bridges if China makes a military incursion onto their island. And in fact, I think they have said something to that effect, that they will not allow the Chinese to commandeer their nanometer level chip manufacturing facilities that are the best in the world, that provide 90% of all the high-end chips that all of these technology stocks, and not only that, crypto as well, because Bitcoin mining requires lots of energy and requires lots of chips. So I'm not sure if that's going to make Bitcoin even more valuable because that means that it's going to cost more to mine it, or if it's going to cause people to lose faith in it. I guess that's a story for another day. Anyways, I just thought I would present this because big money knows what's coming. You see, a lot of people, they don't understand how geopolitics, or at least a lot of financial people, they don't talk enough about how the leading indicator of the markets is geopolitics, and it's usually by a couple years. They just look at, the Fed and this and that, but the Fed is also responding to these shifts, especially the big shift that's happening right now, which is a shift to a multipolar world. Okay, the Fed isn't in front of that. The geopolitics is the leading indicator for all of these things, and not enough people pay enough attention to it. And in fact, a leading indicator to geopolitics is fifth generation warfare, aka social influence, which is why I'm talking about the situation with people like Andrew Tate in my video I did yesterday. Most people can't see the connection, but all of these things are connected. If you can control the minds of people, you can control politics, you control economics, you control whether or not they're going to support going to war. Okay? It's all interconnected, guys. Anyways, let's go over Max Morton over at the Forward Observer YouTube channel, which I would encourage you to check out. I really like this channel because they're really objective. They very, very seldom let politics enter the conversation, and definitely not in a way that's fanatical and not in a way that's going to alienate any of their viewers. So I really like their open source intelligence expertise that they bring to bear there. Typically, we come to the same conclusions with our disseminations, but I just do all the math in my head, and they give you that long-form division, point-by-point breakdown, which is very, very useful for people. So where should we start here? Obviously, there's a military buildup right now in China. Now, Max's main argument is that the Chinese have a window of opportunity, okay, in order to make an actual landed incursion onto the beaches of Taiwan. And that is going to come about sometime between, I believe it's between May and June, quite possibly, or late March, early May. Because the Taiwan Strait, you know, it's, here's the Taiwan Strait here. You can see all of this traffic, okay? This is another thing. If a war breaks out here, all of this traffic needs to be rerouted in some way, shape, or form. Nobody's going to insure ships moving through a war zone. And there are trillions of dollars of goods that flow through this strait every year. Goods that you go and purchase at Walmart, okay? So it's imperative that war doesn't break out in and around this region. And even if there's a military-style embargo here, you're likely to see ships having to be possibly rerouted all the way around, which will drastically increase the cost of shipping, among other things. It's just going to create a whole lot of chaos. Now, there might be some corridors, secure corridors, insured by China in the case of such a thing. I would assume that there might be something like that, because this is a huge space. This is hundreds of miles. Okay, it looks small on the map, but it's actually very big. And it looks like this is, but you're probably, if you're one of these ships, you can't even see another ship on the horizon, okay, because it's just such a big space. Regardless, we know that shipping is going to be drastically compromised. Anyways, there are 2 times of the year, according to Max, that you can do a landed incursion onto the beaches of Taiwan, okay, do an actual ground invasion of Taiwan. And he says that that is late March to early May or October and December. Otherwise, the visibility is bad, it's stormy, it's rainy, these seas can get very treacherous. So he suggests that you can't really do a military-style invasion unless it's during those time periods. Now, this all coincides with what the Russians are saying, which is what the speculation is in Ukraine, I should say, that the Russians are going to be doing a winter offensive between now and April. This, of course, would coincide, and this would cause the United States and NATO to have to split their attention on 2 fronts, and the Chinese would probably want to seize on this opportunity, this one opportunity, because it may be the only time they have this opportunity to be able, and they might decide, well, you know, our chances of doing this now are better than should we wait till 2025 or 2027, like many people have anticipated. But the reason why 30 days, Max speculates that they could still impose an embargo during this period. And that would bring us to around January 30th. Okay, let's just say theoretically an embargo, military embargo is placed on Taiwan starting January 30th. By the end of February, Taiwan, who is totally dependent on outside sources for its energy, as well as a lot of other commodities, is going to run out of fuel, and their population is going to start to get hungry because they just simply don't have the stockpiles of energy and food and other resources to last and to have a functioning economy for more than really 30 days. And 30 days is probably being a bit generous. So that means that would put us at around March. Around that time, China now has the weather conditions permitting them to do that ground diversion. You have a weakened Taiwan government. The people are there's probably civil unrest. There's probably a lot of upheaval and protest. There might even be a lot of turncoats in there who are, and apparently there's still a lot of support for mainland China in Taiwan, but don't quote me on that. Those people might become more vocal. Now, what does Taiwan do at this point? Do they burn it all down? Okay. Does the U.S. get involved at this point? Well, Max doesn't think so, but we're going to bring him on the channel because I think it's important that he can break this all down in greater detail than I can do justice with my synopsis here today. But there are a lot of data points that support that this could potentially play out and why China would want to do this. Because with an embargo, they could potentially avoid a war. Now, China is not historically a very warlike civilization. Okay, they tend to not be that imperialist, not nearly as imperialist as many other nations have been throughout history. So if they can avoid a war, just impose an embargo, and then relatively peacefully secure all the chip manufacturing facilities, and of course have Taiwan, which is a strategic point from there, like basically provides them, like right now it's a huge gap in their national security to have this island of which U.S. weapons are right on. It's kind of like their Ukraine, only there's water dividing it, so it's a little bit harder to access. But so they want it for military purposes, but they also want it for obviously economic purposes because they have the chips. Like artificial intelligence is about to take over the world. Okay, somebody sent me a link the other day about ChatGPU or whatever it's called, and this thing can just do incredible things. But in order for that, you need energy and you need chips. And as Vladimir Putin said, whoever rules the chip war, or whoever wins the chip war, is basically going to rule the world. Because artificial intelligence is going to empower us in so many ways in terms of our ability to predict what is going to happen next. It's just in terms of military intelligence, it's going to change the game on the battlefield. So it's very important to secure Taiwan. This is why we even care about Taiwan. This is the new gold. Chips are the new gold. So China, according to Max, is worried that the U.S. is going to interfere within these operations. If they were to do a major military operation, they need to make sure that the U.S. does not intervene in the first 4 days, because then they might have another Ukraine quagmire on their hands like the Russians are dealing with right now, where seemingly anyways there's this stalemate, even though both sides will say that they're winning. I'll leave it up to you to be the judge as to who is actually winning. Other data points to support this are that there are joint military operations taking place with Russia and China that we've been talking about. We have these close encounters with Chinese Navy flying jets within 10 feet of U.S. Air Force plane over the South China Sea. And this has happened numerous times. We also have one of the largest incursions into Taiwanese airspace. And these incursions, they're saying that they're becoming more and more intense. And they describe it in the interview with Max as a squeeze and release strategy. Okay? So that you're adding pressure to Taiwan's military, you're sending out these planes into Taiwanese airspace. They have to scramble their jets. Next time you do it more and more, and to the point where eventually one day it's not going to be an exercise and it's actually going to be an all-out attack on Taiwan. So getting Taiwan to presume that, okay, it's just another exercise, just another routine incursion into our airspace, even though they're getting more and more intense, then one day it's not an exercise anymore. it's an actual attack. Okay, so that is the concern. Now, the question is Taiwan going to what are they going to do? Are they going to torch these facilities? Because this really is what it's all about. It really is all about the chip manufacturing facilities in Taiwan. Obviously, there's military utility to this region of South China Sea, but the primary driver of this, I'm guessing, especially from the U.S. support of Taiwan point of view, is the chips. We need chips in our military. We need chips in our phones. We need chips to ensure that people can keep getting cheap TV sets, because that really has been something that I think has softened the blow of the increased cost of living, the increased cost of rent, food, gasoline, all of these things. Gas is going up again, and that's scary because typically this is the time of year when gas goes down because not a lot of people are commuting as much. Anyways, that's concerning for next year, all right? But typically, cheap electronics were supposed to be something that softened the blow of this other inflation in our cost of living. So technological deflation somewhat offsets the burden of commodities inflation. So if you can go and get a TV set, 4K big screen TV for the price of 1 week's worth of groceries, then you're still relatively happy, right? But for a lot of our generation nowadays, without their electronics, they're going to be absolutely miserable. And the promise of all of this technology and the thing that was driving the NASDAQ up before everything got really sketchy, and you can even make the argument that in November, maybe they anticipated that this thing was going to start with Russia and China and the World War was going to start, and that is why, this just never materialized, and maybe it's now been kicked down the road 10, 20 years, which is what it absolutely will be if these TSMC facilities are torched or whatever the case might be. Even if China does commandeer these facilities, are they going to be able to match the output of Taiwan? So I think there's a lot of unknowns here, but what Max is trying to say, and I'm not trying to put words in his mouth or anything, is that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this could happen within the next 30 days. And our life would change substantially. It would be, we would take our economic woes that we have right now, and it would take it to the depressionary level in a lot of cases. We're talking about 5 to 10% of the US GDP being slashed as a result of this, not counting, just the discontent that would be in the streets. And this is why they're trying to crack down on anybody who could act as a martyr or a galvanizing force for a bunch of people who are upset, who can't feed themselves paycheck to paycheck, and who are rioting in the streets. So you need that technological deflation to kind of keep people happy. Otherwise, you're going to have technological stagflation in a sense, and that's going to lead to an economic depression. So, and you also need technological deflation to counterbalance the monetary inflation that occurs just from pumping too much money into the system. Okay, so even though lots of things are cheaper now, like TVs are much cheaper than they were relative to the 1950s or something like that. Everything else is still wildly more expensive relative to that point in time. So this is also going to impact the crypto space, as I've said, because crypto relies on these chips. Crypto needs energy. Russia takes its energy off the market, which it has. It's not selling to nations who impose and enforce the price cap for either oil or gas. That is going to raise the price of energy. If we go into another war, like full war, with NATO and Russia, then energy is going to skyrocket. We also have this situation here. Iran is holding military drills near strategic Strait of Hormuz. Nothing necessarily out of the ordinary there, but in light of all these other things that are happening, including this, which should be concerning to anybody who thinks that Russia is running out of supplies. So Russia has provided or is going to supply Iran with dozens of Sukhoi 35 fighter jets. And these are fairly advanced fighter jets. And, you would think that if Russia was fighting this war with NATO, what do they stand to gain from doing this? Obviously, there is that military partnership, and this just adds to the evidence that suggests that the lines between NATO and the East are becoming more cemented and hardened, and these alliances are becoming more emboldened. We also have the issue of this. Okay, this is insane. This is Climate Reanalyzer. All this red, that is unseasonably warm temperatures. So if you can see on the spectrum on the camera there, so anything, it goes from white to blue, anything that's blue to white is going to be where the weather is colder than normal. Anywhere where it's warmer colors, red, orange, yellow, etc., that's where it's going to be, where it's warmer than normal. Did I say warmer? I said, yeah, colder than normal for down here, warmer for up here. Now, if you look at this, let's go to temperature anomaly here. Okay, so you can see that Toronto right now, New York, the East Coast, after incurring that massive snowstorm, is now going to be seeing record temperatures. All of these wild weather fluctuations due to the breakdown of the jet stream are going to increase energy demands. Right now, California is getting some atmospheric rivers. And a lot of people are saying, well, this is going to bring relief to these drought-ridden regions. But the exact same thing happened on Vancouver Island, in Abbotsford, BC, in fact, where you had the worst drought that people had seen there in many generations, followed by this atmospheric river that completely decimated the crops. Like, it completely wiped out all the crops. So we're seeing these two extremes. So this is not a homeostatic environment. This is not equilibrium. This is everything being split into its extremes. So now these warm weather, I mean, look at this in Europe over here. South America, it's slightly below average, but in the northern hemisphere, look how red Europe is right now. And this is, you can bet that these record warm temperatures that they're seeing in Ukraine and even in Moscow are likely what is causing a lot of problems. The Ukrainians are complaining about mud, the Russians are complaining about mud, and the ground is just not freezing like perhaps they expected it to freeze. So that could be one thing. This is how climate factors into the calculus of these wars, and can't be understated. So if we look at sea surface temperature anomaly, the sea is not much better. So if you look where the sea is warmest or warmer than normal, it's all around the coastal regions where all the most populated places are. Okay, so it's pretty crazy. There's actually a thin line of, like where it's colder, but just on the outskirts is where it's warmer temperatures, warmer than normal temperatures being recorded. So this suggests that energy demand is going to be increasing, and if China imposes this embargo because they feel as though the timing is right and it's going to be easiest to do it now, then we could see shortages in all of those things that just recently they were trying to liquidate because they couldn't get rid of them. Recall that 2022 was the year of the staple monopoly shortages. So gas, food, all of those things that we need in order to survive, those things were in short supply and inflated in price, while the price of a lot of other things, the crap that we don't need, came down. Well, what this is going to do is raise the prices again on the crap that we don't need. So 2023, we could see not a reversal, because the price of food and all those things is going to continue to remain sky high. Another interesting data point, of course, that we've talked about for some time is that China has been stockpiling food to the tune of having their grain silos fuller than they've ever been before. In anticipation of what? We are left to ask. So this all looks like 2023 could start off with a bang. I'm curious to know, what do you guys think about all this information? Do you think nothing is going to happen at all? I think that there is definitely potential for something to happen here. I think the way, maybe not in the next 30 to 60 days, but there's definitely a lot of evidence to suggest that something is going to happen in this region this year. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Canadian Prepper out.